Okay, so Terry, this
Yes.
is your show.
Yes, thank you. Thanks for joining. I wanted to
This
thank
meeting is
everyone
being
for
recorded.
participating again this year in this work to modify the QAP. I really appreciate this. So in this next hour, the first part of the meeting, I'd like to describe the outreach that's occurred with a public input period, the sustainability work group, an opportunity work group, and contact we've made and work we've begun with a nationally renowned expert on the qualified allocation plan and LIHTC program in general. Lastly, for the latter part of the meeting, we'd like to really discuss our intentions around the upcoming QAP and the timing of the rollout. You should have gotten in your packages a memo that will describe what's been going on, and also has a summary of all the public comments, each of the public comments in their entirety, and a sort of a context for it. Did everyone get it?
You are muted. You can mute or unmute yourself by pressing *6.
I'm going to mute folks.
Thank you. Thank you, Amy. All right, so just to give you an idea of some common themes, you probably recognize these yourselves. In the public input period, people suggested strongly either including or incentivizing or in some way recognizing elderly housing, sustainability, opportunity areas, preservation, and pre-applications. Those were the things that really rose to the top. Staff is currently researching best practices with respect to the pre-application process. We'd like to really build on that. Additionally, we're looking at preservation in a different way, which we'll talk about in a little bit. Did anyone, before I put that public comment period aside, did anyone have any questions or concerns or want to speak to the public input? Okay, great. We, during the course of the year, convened two different work groups, an opportunity work group and a sustainability work group. I'll speak first to the sustainability work group, which was a gathering of experts, diverse community members to speak about, within that group, a reevaluation of the sustainability design measures that are in our current QAP. Right now, the work is still ongoing, but we're hoping to have a final meeting in February, at which point that group would develop recommendations for something new to be included in the QAP that would speak to energy efficiency measures that are more flexible and that can reach all different types and nuances in the different developments that we see. We have such a large variety. It's hard to have a broad brush approach to energy efficiency. But we are very cognizant of the state's goals, and so is this group. So we had a lot of conversations and wanted to develop something that worked for everybody. So next month, look forward to seeing that. We also had convened an opportunity work group, and throughout the year, that group met, really talking about refocusing the opportunity mapping that's in the current QAP to, instead of looking at municipalities, look at census tracts. And there was a strong desire, we had heard this from the development community too, to have a map that was shared by both CHFA and DOH, so there wouldn't be any confusion. John took the lead on that, and I'd like to introduce John Cabral, who can describe to you more about the opportunity mapping and give you an idea of what it looks like.
Good morning, everyone. Thanks, Terry. So yes, Terry gave a sort of great background there. So for a number of years now, both the Department of Housing and CHFA have had opportunity maps that has been used for different rounds, for different programs, but they haven't been the same map. So I think most of you know what opportunity maps are. They're used throughout the country for various policy objectives, including housing choice, including where to build affordable housing, where to invest in small business, where to invest in infrastructure, for various different, policy objectives. But many, I would say about at least 5 years ago, the Department of Housing created an opportunity map based on census tracts. It used a variety of different characteristics to measure what opportunity looked like for residents. and it was used to inform their investments. Soon after that, CHFA created its own opportunity map for its light tech round. At that time, when the task force had met, it was decided that we should use an opportunity map that was based on the town level, not the census tract level. It was discussed, and I think at the time, since it was a new map and we generally speak at the town level, it made sense that that's where we should start. However, as most of you know, towns have very different types of communities, different types of neighborhoods, so it wasn't necessarily based on what was happening at the community level, and having the two maps was confusing to developers. And to Terry's point, we had heard from developers and folks that having the two maps was just a little confusing, and in some cases, they kind of contradicted each other. So DOH has recently updated its opportunity map, and it was decided that CHFA should better align with DOH, who is the policy agency for the state. So we worked together on a new opportunity map. And the opportunity map uses different characteristics than we've used at CHFA, but again, the intents are very similar. So I'll try to go through some of those pretty quickly. So the current map we have at CHFA, again, it's based on the municipal level, not the census tract level, so it's not, really doesn't focus on the actual community, but at the town level. Our map currently is pretty binary, so what it does is it awards points based on whether a characteristic is above average compared to the state. So for example, or below average. So for example, the poverty rate, if a town has a poverty rate that's below the state average, then points were awarded. It was yes or no. It was pretty black and white, and it was and it really wasn't as nuanced as, let's say, DOH's map and the new map. And the current map really focused on these characteristics, and for folks on the phone, I'll sort of read them out. So we looked at whether a town was non-exempt on the 830G list. We looked at school performance using the Great School Scoring. We looked at poverty level, jobs to population ratio, and the proximity to community colleges. Again, measuring all that against what the state average is. So if the town performed better than the state average, points were awarded. So again, pretty binary, and that was a criticism, at least by some. So the shared map, again, it's a little bit more nuanced. It's focused on community. DOH had worked or commissioned this new map and worked with the Connecticut Fair Housing Center and Open Community Alliance, and received input from us. And we worked together to try to, again, find a map that worked well for all of us. And that map is really broken down into three categories: education, employment, and neighborhood. Again, very similar to, I think, what CHFA had done, but used the different data sources that I think were better in the long run. They're easy to get, they're public, and easy to update. And those different characteristics are weighted so that one particular characteristic isn't necessarily driving how that community rates and ranks. So again, working with the Connecticut Fair Housing Center, Open Community Alliance has really helped us be able to sort of create the map that makes the most sense for both DOH and CHFA. So just to give you a little flavor of how different the maps are. So at the top left corner here, you'll see what CHFA had used in the 9% round, and points awarded based, again, on the town level. So you can see here Hartford in blue and West Hartford in orange. And it was the whole town was awarded the same amount of points. It wasn't as nuanced as the map at the bottom right-hand corner, where, as you can see, the census tracts had different colors. They're rated from very low to very high. Obviously, there's no points associated with these right now. That will have to be determined. But as you can see, there are differences in the map. There are certain neighborhoods that would perform better than the rest of the town, and other neighborhoods that would perform maybe not as well. So again, it's much more community oriented, and I think it just makes a lot of sense. And what I can do really quickly here is, I don't know if you can see this. We have a beta version of the map. We're working to get the map on our website so that let me see here. Can you see the map? So we're working on getting the map on our website. This is the map that's displayed on Open Community Alliance's website, but we are working to get our own map up. But this was what the map will look like, and a developer or anyone who would like to know can type in an address. I'll just type in Rocky Hill here, and it will zoom right into the neighborhood, and you can see what characteristics or what level that neighborhood rates. We're building that map in-house. We should have something very soon. Lori Zajak's working on that as we speak. And once we have points associated with the QAP, we can actually add that in here so that it's easier and more straightforward for any developer who is looking to use 9%. So I think with that, I was trying to go quick, trying to get to all the points. I can answer any questions, if there are any questions.
Thanks, John. That was very helpful. It's nice to see the map live, too, to see that beta version and be able to pick out what you do. Just plug in your address, and there you go. Very nice.
And we've had a map that's similar to that, so we're trying to create something that developers are used to, and that should be launched soon. And if you have any questions, feel free to reach out to me, and I can get those answered.
Jonathan, I would just like to thank you for your great work on that. That's going to be a really helpful tool. And, you know, that was a lot of work is what is very clear. So thank you for taking lead on that. And thank you for the great product that you're producing here.
No problem. It was a great partnership between DOH and Open Community Alliance and the Fair Housing Center. There were great conversations and robust conversations. So I'm very happy with how that turned out.
And thanks, Commissioner, too, for including that diversity of stakeholders. That's, you know, that can be challenging to get everybody around a table and then come to agreement. So I'm sort of stunned sitting here that you are as far along as you are, because I'm sure there were some very robust and spirited discussions about how to get there. So hats off to you, Commissioner, to you, Nandini, and Jonathan, to you and Terry as well. Thank you.
So, yeah, it wasn't easy bringing, you know, Community Alliance and Fair Housing Center, those two groups, and they take ownership of their products, and the previous maps were done by those two organizations. So I challenged them to meet and be able to come up with one, because first of all, it will help the developers to be able to not have two different sets of rules in trying to fit in those. So now we look at the data, at developments, how they were affected and were going to be affected. So I think we arrived to a very good place. It would be better, in the process will be also a lot simple than before. And at the beginning, I thought that they were not going to take me on, and there was a lot of arguments. At the end, I was very pleased that everybody got to that same place and understood what the goal was. So thank you to the staff to really move on the needle on that.
Okay. Also, we began work with the consultants. I think you are all aware that we have retained a consultant, Mark Shelburne from Novogradac, to work with us as a nationally renowned expert, and certainly one with vast experience in the LifeTech program and QAPs nationwide. The focus of his work is going to be helping us consider threshold items, classifications, and points incentives. He's providing context, helping us with proposed revisions, and also helping us to evaluate the timing of the introduction of these various things and what the impact might be on the development community. So to that, I had shared a draft calendar that just outlined the initial work that we're doing in the spring. It got us through to May, and it just talked about anticipated changes that, as we had telegraphed to the development community. We're meeting as a board task force after each of the board meetings for the next several months. But during that time, we'll complete the work with the sustainability work group and begin to share with you draft revisions, at least in portions. So say, for example, the opportunity piece, as that's revised, we'll be able to share that with you. The sustainability design piece, which comes under, I think, financial efficiency and sustainability as a points item. That section will be revised and shared with you. And then we'll have something as a whole rather than try to get it all at once. At this time, we're thinking we want to change the classifications, and we've been working with Mark on talking about new construction and preservation. But is that something we can roll out now, or is it something that needs to be moved ahead? So thinking about the development community and the impact these changes will have on them, and they have development in their pipelines already, what we were proposing, we were talking about the multi-year QAP, but what we were proposing is something that is phased in, like 2 phases. So we have a 22 to 25 QAP. In the 22 version, we introduce revisions to the points sections, sustainability and opportunity. And in 23, we build on that by introducing the new classifications. But we'd have to do this almost all together because we want the developers to see it early. We don't want to wait until, after 22 is complete and then roll out 23. It still gives us the time crunch. So if we work on them simultaneously, we have the 2 noticed essentially at the same time. So that even if it takes a month or 2 longer to get the 2023 completed, it still gives the developers an extra year, let's say, to look at it and to prepare for their pipeline so they can anticipate what's coming and know where they're going to be looking to create their next development. So it does add a lot of work in the beginning, but at the same time, it seems the most effective way to roll out the entire concept, as opposed to trying to do everything together, which is one of my colleagues at DOH calls the rip the Band-Aid off approach. And you just say, here's everything. We're changing classifications, we're changing points, we're potentially changing the way your project would score, and you already have it in your development pipeline to come in for, an application. Your call if you think that would be a better way to go, but our recommendation is to try the phase-in approach and see, if that meets with your approval.
Can I suggest one thing really quickly? Terry, could you explain, would you mind explaining the task force, our thinking behind a different classification and why that may be something we want to look at?
Yes, I know we had talked briefly about it, maybe end of last year, about do we really need to have the same classes that we've had all along? Is it accomplishing what we want? And so we're looking to create some more intentionality around the deployment of 9% credits. It's important for us to be able to communicate that this is what's important. For example, our intention is to fund family housing and areas of opportunity, and we recognize that that's our priority, and we recognize that there's a need for preservation and rehab work, and so we're going to do that too, but it's going to be in its own category. It's not going to compete for the same points. It's very difficult for someone to come in and be competitive when they have a rehab, even if it's a massive rehab, and they're coming in for the 9%, and they're trying to, put the square peg in the round hole. They've got the opportunity areas, which is highly suburban. They might be urban. You've got the energy efficiency things. You can't really necessarily retrofit passive house into something that's existing. And supportive housing, they may have already a full house. Their developments may be full. So how do you get points when those are the highest priorities that we have? So we're thinking, we do want new units. That is critical, but we do recognize that people need to have quality of life in their homes. It's just important to recognize and to communicate to folks what is our priority, what is our intention. And if we were to say that we want to use the 9% for new construction, for family housing, for areas of opportunity, then everything else for preservation, that takes a lot of pressure off. We could divide it any way you want. It doesn't have to be like 50-50, like the current structure is now. It could be more, I think we currently, just by our nature of our applications, do something like 60-40, 60% new construction, 40% rehab. We could choose to do something less than that and say we want to do 80% new construction, 20% rehab. You don't have to even say percent. You could say I want to do 2 rehab preservation deals and the rest are new construction. You know, there's any way you can frame it, but it's important. We in our current QAP for years, we've been trying to please everybody, and it really, as you can probably see, we don't please everybody. Everybody has something to say about it. Nobody's really happy. So if we just can accommodate our intentions, specifically say what they are, and accommodate preservation. Excuse me.
Terry, right now, the way that we have it is actually about 50% public housing and 50% of general. So
right.
it might just, if we're going to do 50% preservation, so we're saying preservation is important, but right now only in that classification, the 50% is only public housing. We have done a lot of the public housing right now, so we still have some more work, but right. If we divide 50% preservation, which everybody will get into that, and 50% new construction, so that gives the opportunity for those towns that we want to get in and be able to compete. It doesn't really take away from having new construction in cities if needed, but I think it gives a little more opportunity to create new housing. But so it's just that the declassification of only public housing, but doing a preservation instead.
Right. And to be specific in saying that we want new units, we really need to create new units. There's such a shortage, and yet we recognize both.
Okay.
Sure. Mm-hmm.
Oh, go ahead, Kathy.
Yes. So what would you do with projects that have both components?
Well, I think typically now, if we have a development come in that has a majority of one or the other, that's how we classify.
Okay.
So could I just, I want to speak actually in favor of Commissioner, what you were suggesting, because we do know that we have a major challenge in the next few years with regard to preserving units. So I think that's a really smart way to adjust what we're doing. And I also just wanted to thank you for bringing in that outside additional expertise. I'm really, really excited. I'm hearing about that. I can't wait to see what comes of that. Because Terry, you've done such a fantastic job, but having that additional resource to think outside of our boundaries and understand what has worked elsewhere is just going to be really exciting and really helpful to us. So I'm really pleased about that. And I also just wanted to put a pin in an additional issue, and this may not be something that we can address quickly, but at some point, we do need to think about whether we have sort of gotten to the stock of supportive housing that makes sense. It continues to be a strong priority. Nobody knows better than I do how important supportive housing is, so please hear that. But we should just also acknowledge that, to my knowledge, Connecticut has per capita the biggest stock of supportive housing in the country. And that's a point of pride for us. But at some point, we do have the right stock for the needs that we are using that stock to meet. So I just think we should think about that. I don't know when we hit that point, but I think for a long time we've just been a sort of engine creating it, which is great. But I don't know. I'm a little bit out of touch with the specifics on the exact numbers in homeless work right now, but we were very, very close to housing everyone who was technically chronically homeless. And unless there is a funding stream to support the use of that type of housing for other populations, then when we meet that need, we need to think about how we can shift gears with the very scarce resources that we're working with. So I just wanted to say that, and again, I know that that's not an easy question to answer, but it's something we should have in mind.
So, Lisa, to that end, we are going to be, we have started that conversation again with OPM about the supportive housing. And we're working on some plans. I do want to convene a small group of people, developers, especially in service providers, to what is that new way of supportive housing. I mean, we need support paths. Also, we don't want to penalize the developer or property managers to be able to, the system that we have right now is not as smooth as we want to with the developers, because if you don't get those units occupied, we have little boxes and we're trying to fit people in different boxes. And then when we don't have those people, those units are empty. And that's what we need to address. So we have a proposal together for OPM to get more resources and leverage the new 4% credits or the fix of the 4%. But on the operational side is how we're going to do that. So I will, we are going to have a small group to just talk about those issues.
I think that's a really good point, because the opposite is true. I mean, we have households that aren't in supportive housing but could use the services, you know, and they're at risk of becoming homeless because they don't have the services. So it feels like if the emphasis was on getting the right services to the right people rather than, you know, having it attached to a particular apartment, that might work better.
So, are you volunteering, Kathy, for that?
Of course.
That's really well put, Kathy, and that's very exciting to hear, Commissioner. I'll look forward to hearing what emerges out of that discussion. That's great.
We have heard, to Kathy's point, we have heard from the owners of the state-sponsored housing portfolio that many of their residents could use services and they're not available. And in general, in the public housing realm, there are folks who could really benefit from services. And, you know, New Haven Housing Authority has had success in bringing in on staff someone who could provide for many of them, but it's not enough. I think that's the challenge, is where does the service funding come from? How do we get services to the folks who need it? And while we may have a need currently for something like 4,000 new units of supportive housing, that number will probably be up and down, but the number of services is a lot greater than that. So that's a good point, and I'm so excited that there's some new work going forward. Folks may know about the CHEST initiative, which is to introduce Medicaid as a service funder. So that would be very exciting if we can have that support underlying some of our households in the LIHTC units. It's hard to do supportive housing in LIHTC. You know, I think we all recognize that, because it's a mixed income community, and you want to be able to have, you know, services provided to keep people happy, healthy, and safe where they are. And, you know, that's the challenge. How does that happen? So I did make a note of that, Lisa, and thanks for bringing it up, because that's definitely bears for further conversation. So what do you think about the timing that we're suggesting? The phased-in approach, or all at once? I don't know. I mean, we have a compressed time frame, remember, so we need to get everything complete so we could do a public comment really by, say, May, so that June, when the full board convenes, they'll have something to look at and react to as a permanent, you know, say April they look at a draft, June they look at a final, there's a public comment period in May, and if there's a lot of changes, that might mean that there's another public comment period, you know, in July, and the board would have to look at, say you don't meet in August, but maybe in September, that would be a September, which for a final QAP to be released in January of 2022. So just so that folks have an idea. What do you think, Tim?
It's so first of all, thanks for all the work you've done on this. I think it's great. You know, from my own personal standpoint, the phase-in makes a lot of sense. Having said that, what I would say is we know who the experts are, right? And so why don't we get some feedback from them to see what makes sense? Look, we're not going to make everyone happy, right? I mean, that's part of democracy, I guess, right? I mean, you know, that's part of the issue. But I think we've come, or you guys have come a really, really long way from where we were, and hopefully people will appreciate that and buy into it. But yeah, from a phased approach makes a lot of sense to me. But you know, poll a few people and see what their thoughts are, and then we can go that direction.
Okay. So maybe what we could do is to have a quick meeting, Anthony, with the housing authorities, a couple of the big housing authorities that have been doing developments, because those are the ones that are going to be protected, because we're changing the definition of just public housing and just make it a preservation, which they can apply. But I think that maybe we should have a quick conversation with them and say, hey, with this, you're still going to be able to apply for preservation, but we want to remove that because we also want to, and you can also apply for the new construction. I mean, there's not any, so you go both ways, right?
Yes.
But we can do that. We can have a quick conversation before you put it up to public comments.
Okay.
In the meantime, I think Terry will work with Mark and start thinking about these two set-asides or classifications, because what we're really recommending is looking at these very differently, because you may not want mixed income in one versus the other. You know, kind of like if you're thinking about preservation, maybe you want to encourage mixed income. And maybe in the new units, if they're in the opportunity areas, maybe you want more affordability there. So it's an opportunity to kind of think about things kind of critically and strategically about where you want to go with the resources and what end results you're trying to achieve. So we want to put something in front of you, but I think we just wanted your opinion about, you know, are you kind of in favor of looking at things a little bit differently, more intentionally? Are you in favor of a phased-in approach? Again, trying to get feedback on that is a great idea as well. So, yeah.
Randy, I want to second what Tim had already said. I think the phased-in approach is great, but getting more feedback is terrific. But I wanted to also ask an additional question, and you can tell me if that's not something that fits in this category. But we've talked in the past, and I'm sorry that Kylie isn't here. I don't think she's one of these numbers, is she?
No.
I think Kylie's on this committee. No?
She is. She's
just not here today. But, you know, Kylie is really one of the experts on our board on an issue that we have talked about quite a bit, which is the concentration, especially in places like Hartford, of, you know, the over-concentration of subsidized housing. Is that something that we can engage with our consultant to talk about? I don't know if that's so specific to the way we've worked in Connecticut, that there aren't other precedents, and it may be that the QAP is not a vehicle to address that, and I'm open to that if that's the answer. But I'd be really interested to know if we can explore that question, because as we look at that opportunity map, if it works the way we, I think, intended to, it would move investment out of places like the downtown of Hartford. And, you know, in some ways that's as it should be, but in other ways we do have to be thinking ahead of the curve of what that means and how we're going to try and address that thorny issue. So I just wanted to put that on the table.
And I can just give you a little of perspective from the department. We are actually, Kylie and Melissa from the Regional Plan Association is meeting with me, and we are actually intentionally looking at that particular issue on the redevelopment of our neighborhoods in the cities and how can we approach that task. So we bring in as a consultant, because my staff is just all over the place. So we are going to be working with Melissa as we did for the affordable housing plans that we developed with them. And it's out right now, the guide for the towns to be able to really take a look at how to develop their affordable housing plans for the 830J rules that they have to have those plans by 2022, I think it is. So we have been trying to be proactive to help them because they need a lot of technical assistance, and we also provided some grants so that they can start working on that.
And does that work have an intersection with the QAP, Commissioner, or is your answer to say that these are working in two different columns?
No, it's working right now. We're just looking at how we're going to frame some of that, and I have asked Nancy also to join. It's just a small group right now to see how we're going to start that conversation, because we do need to work with the cities. And that's one of the things that and some of the nonprofits that are doing some of the work. But how do we bring everybody together? We have some resources to help, but we're going to need some other partners to put some of the money in a more significant way than just the small little grants, but increasing the capacity and also increasing the work that some of the organizations are doing in the neighborhoods.
That's great. I'd appreciate it if in this context we can keep an eye on that, because I would suggest that when we message the way the QAP is changing and the opportunity map, it'll be really important at the same time to talk about that set of issues, because we will be hearing about it, right? So that's great if we can just pick that back up at whatever point is possible.
Yeah, and I think of it also as a and approach. I don't think one thing is going to solve the problem. I think we're going to have to use all the resources that we have available to us, including home ownership, as a way of rebuilding neighborhoods. And certainly the QAP is a tool, and we should be using it in a way that promotes the rebuilding and the reinvesting of parts of the city that are currently disinvested. So I absolutely agree with you on that.
Can I just piggyback on one thing that Lisa just said, and that is communication with people. I think it is insanely important how we actually communicate this out to the public. Getting information out, helping people understand. And I think we, probably do a pretty good job. I think many times if people don't put as much focus on kind of the messaging. And so I think it's incredibly important for us to make sure we focus in on that, because that's what's going to get people to buy into it a little bit more. And then lastly, I think, as we talk about other communities, and particularly communities who aren't particularly interested or hesitant, using some of the examples. I mean, I look at New Canaan as an example. New Canaan has done some pretty good affordable housing in the past a few years. And if you can do it in a community like New Canaan, then you can do it everywhere else. And so how do we get people on board to say, oh, okay, it's not exactly what I thought it was. We can make this work. So utilizing some of those towns to help us kind of get the messaging out.
That's a really good idea.
I think this
that
would be...
is, and I'm sorry, Kathy. I would love to see, the prospect of CHFA building out a series of conversations so that leaders from places like New Canaan could share their perspective, and we could share visuals. I think the visuals matter a lot, and it would be worth thinking about how to get some really good and comprehensive visuals together. And if we pair that with testimonials from leadership and from people in those communities, if we could do just a few of those, I think that could be really powerful. That's a great idea, Tim.
I just think this is a great opportunity to try and make the tax credit program a little more nimble. It is sort of this like Goliath that you bring to funding, and in terms of things like the long-term affordability, if you're developing affordable housing in New Canaan, maybe you want to incentivize a 99-year restriction. But if you're doing a development in Frog Hollow, maybe you don't incentivize the long-term, affordability restrictions.
Exactly what we were thinking, like kind of making those distinctions. Using a very different set of criteria based on because it always felt like the program just sort of came and it was
it's just not nimble and it's not, responsive to community needs. The other comment I had in terms of the phased in, it seems like, I think there should be a lot of transparency in terms of, where the QAP is going. So even if the points and, aren't established, because there's such a long lead time and a significant investment made to get to, people are working on projects now that will be going in 2 or 3 years. I think, to Tim's point too, I think, you can never over communicate things, but I think to give some transparency in terms of this is getting phased in and this is the general direction that the program is going will be important.
Agreed.
Well, it sounds like generally everyone who's expressed an opinion likes the phased-in approach, but we're asked to reach out to the housing authorities in particular, who will be the most impacted when we change classifications, and then see what their sense is.
I think we should.
I have to support my DOH staff, and they like it. Let's just dive in. Yes. So that's why we're going to have the conversation with the housing authorities.
Yeah, I think we should have a specific conversation with the housing authorities because of the actual sort of impact on them, which is much more sort of direct. But then maybe like Kathy was just saying and Tim said earlier, once we kind of know the direction we're headed, maybe a little bit of clarity, not yet. Like right now I feel like very vague, but have a little bit more clarity and be able to bring that forward in listening sessions. Like, we have to do that because otherwise it's just not going to be clear to anybody. Yeah.
Like the tipping point session that partnership convened, it was very helpful to be able to put out some general topics and say, this is what we're thinking, how's everybody reacting, and what are your opinions? And then, anything goes, because you really genuinely want to know, what do other people feel is the right thing to do in terms of the success that we're going to see moving forward. So, okay. All right. So we'll wait to hear more on that. So understanding that we have a compressed time frame, are you all comfortable with just meeting after the board meeting? And if necessary, in between, if there was a need to do something in between board meetings, would you be amenable to a quick, half hour to resolve something, or another hour meeting?
Or longer if needed.
Yes. Okay. That's terrific.
Terry, it would be really helpful if it's part of the work description with the consultant, and if it's not, I understand, but if it were possible just to have a session with him, not about our QAP, but to review kind of key lessons that he wants us to think about, and then we can turn back to the QAP, because usually we're engaged with you as we should be to get done and to vote on decisions. But if we had a separate session to think more broadly and to learn what he can bring to us, I would appreciate that. I don't know if that works for others here, but I think that could be really helpful.
That's a great idea. What's everybody okay with that? We could do that sooner then. We don't have to wait until February board. We could do that very quickly if we could convene another meeting and, have Mark join us. And really that would be the focus of the meeting. That would be great. Okay. Is there any other input, anything in particular anybody has on their mind about this process or about where we're going, or thoughts that we hadn't discussed already?
I'm just so excited for the new energy and the additional thoughts, and it's a lot of work, Terry, for you, and Nandini for you, and Masuda, Terry, Rob, all of you, Amy, John. It's such a great team, and we know that you're all going to be pulling a lot of weight to make these changes. But it's really exciting and can, I think, mean so much to turn this asset into a more productive one for the state. So thank you.
Exactly. Thank you, Lisa. It does feel like we are really at a moment where we can make change happen, and it's going to be very meaningful. So I'm very excited about it as well. So I wanted to keep this first meeting to an hour just to sort of set the table and see what we're going to do next, but we'll move forward with a meeting with the consultant. I will look for your availability. Maybe Amy could help me with that, to look for your availability for a meeting in the next, say, 2 weeks. And then when we move to meet after the February board meeting, we'll have revisions to consider, to begin to consider. Okay, and then maybe in the meantime, if Commissioner, you and Numpany are meeting with the housing authorities, you can provide guidance on that will inform the work that we're doing as well.
Yes, and Nandini, Amy, I mean, you guys can look for a time. We can do it as soon as possible.
Okay. Yeah, I want to do a little bit of thinking around. I mean, they may ask the question, so I want to take a little bit of time to think about that. Yeah.
So we're prepared.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely. Hi, Kylie. We'll fill you in.
Sorry, I'm joining you so late. We had a board meeting in between this, so.
Not at all. We were just talking about, and we'll fill you in too. It's a lot of exciting stuff. But what we were just talking about is having a meeting within the next, say, couple of weeks with this task force and the consultant, specifically just to talk to him about, things that we should be thinking about, the changes that we're suggesting, timing, impact, our desire for intentionality and where we're going. And then in February, after the board meeting, when we meet again, we'll have some revisions to look at.
Great.
Okay. So is there anybody else have any comments?
Tim, I just have a question. I am curious, Sayla, Nandini, what do you think the reaction from the housing authorities, what do you think the reaction is going to be?
I'll be like a weatherman, 50-50 chance.
Okay. Well, I'm looking forward to hearing. I think that's going to be an interesting conversation.
Yeah. But I think also we need to have that conversation. We haven't had it. I mean, we had some housing authorities at the beginning, but we haven't had a conversation with them. I think we do need, it's time to have a conversation with them too. Yeah. Although we have some projects from the different housing authorities and talk one-on-one, we haven't really had that meeting with them. So I think that is important.
Right.
50-50.
Thank you, Terry.
Yeah, you're very welcome.
Awesome work.
Yeah, thank you. All right, everyone. We have a few extra minutes. Thanks so much.
All right.
For your time.
Thanks a lot. Take care.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.
Goodbye.